I've seen a lot of Ox beetles in the tropics, but never as many as this. All of these were collected in the same little patch of dirt. And I'm not quite sure what attracted them to that specific spot, but I can only imagine that an animal had taken a dump there earlier. I'm not so sure that these are Carolina copris. I think there's some other species. The normal circumstances under which you usually see these is at night near lights, and when they fly in, they're a shiny black color. But I think all of these are covered in manure. That's what they were digging around in. And I'm always impressed by the fact that every time these beetles want to fly around at night, they have to create a new burrow in the morning. And you can see here, these beetles do have a little horn, but that's only the males that have horn like this. And there are major males and there are minor males. This is a major. The minor males don't really have a prominent horn like this, and they're typically smaller. I'm going to put these guys on the ground now, and we can watch how quickly a lot of them start digging as a first resort of escaping. And there you have it. This is more or less the sight I was met with when I first saw these on the ground. The streetlights have gone dark, and it is time to go look for our beetle. They should be walking around on the road after having been attracted by the mercury vapor lamps. One of the beetles that we're looking for is right here, sitting on a mossy stone. This beetle is commonly known as the ox beetle, or in Latin, Strategus aloeus, and it is a species of Rhinostomus beetle. As larvae, these beetles spend pretty much all of their time underground or sitting in rotten logs, and take about a few years to pupate, and then another few months to emerge as an adult like the one we see here. As soon as these emerge and then harden up enough, they make their way out into the night sky and fly in the direction of the moon. But when they aren't flying around, the adult beetles will also hide in the ground, or sometimes under things like leaf litter or logs sitting on the ground. But as well as flying around at night in search of mates, this is also when they search for food, and their diet consists almost entirely of fruit that's laying on the ground and already opened up to some degree. Now, of course, this one is a male. It has 3 horns, and in my experience, it's a little tougher to find males than females, so we'll probably see proportionally more females tonight than we will males. We have a Panama blonde tarantula sitting up in this tree here. This species here is Psalmopoeus pulcher, which goes by the common name, like I said, Panama blonde tarantula, but that is not to be confused with the Panama gold tarantula. That would be a Phonoplma belinde, and they aren't very closely related at all. And there are several species of Psalmopoeus that can be found in Colombia, but in this region, it has no sympatry or overlap with any other species in the genus. And speaking of distribution, this one is only known from 2 countries, Panama, which is its namesake obviously, and Colombia, where we are right now. I'm actually at the edge of its range in the northeastern direction, and you can tell that the species is quite drab. It doesn't really exhibit any colors outside of the brown and gray scale, but here on the feet pads, you can see some iridescence of blues and greens, and this can be found in many tarantula species. And speaking of its anatomy, spiders in this genus are well known for their slightly elongated first and second pair of legs. Psalmopoeus tends to be quite hirsute in general, or hairy, but this is especially true also for the first and second pair of legs here. And this special anatomy probably has something to do with the fact that these tarantulas and others in the genus Psalmopoeus tend to be largely arboreal in nature. I've just spotted this bearded weevil in a tree right here. This is only the second time I've encountered one in my life. The scientific name of this weevil species is Rhinostoma barbarostris. The first half of that name in barbarostris refers to the bristles, and the second half refers to the nose, and therefore it essentially means bristled nose. Now, unfortunately, this specimen doesn't exhibit the brush-like nose that this species is well known for, and that's because this specimen is a female, and that phenotype is only something that you can find in males of this species. This brush-like nose that males possess has given them the second common name of bottlebrush weevil. This beetle is a New World endemic and is only found in tropical areas, mostly in Central America and much of South America, and in many parts of its distribution, it is the largest weevil species, but overall, it's also one of the largest weevil species in the world. And I must say, handling these isn't very pleasant. They have these little hooks on their legs, and they actually dig into the skin quite effectively. Normally, these are useful for clamping down on trees when predators try to remove them. I'm just going to place it back in the tree here. We have our first female ox beetle sitting on a road here, not doing much. The quick and easy way to tell that this is a female is of course the lack of horns, but you shouldn't stop there for reasons that I'll explain later. Another way you can tell is that these females have a lot of little pitting or small dents in the thorax there. And I say that they have no horns, but there is a tiny little bump near the head. And as I mentioned, in my experience, these do tend to be more common than males. And you might be able to tell that this female here is the same size as that male that we found. And this is typically the case. I think on average, there is a slight difference between the two, but it's pretty much negligible. And you can see that this female is digging in the granite sand here. If I just let this one go, it'd likely fully bury itself and then wouldn't re-emerge until perhaps tomorrow night or after the next heavy rains, which are somewhat rare in this area and also quite unpredictable. And unlike the males of this species, females pretty much always tolerate each other. Meanwhile, males don't tolerate each other if they're looking for a mate, but if males are not looking for a mate, they tolerate each other just as much as the females do, and can sometimes be found living together in the same rotting log post-pupation. For obvious reasons, I'm not going to leave this one on the road, so I'm just going to place it off to the side here instead. This Phrynus here, Phrynus barbadensis, or the Barbados tailless whoop scorpion, is hanging out on the side of this tree because above it is a streetlight, and this streetlight is attracting all sorts of insects that are climbing onto the tree, and this is what this arachnid is feeding on. It's a bit of a trade-off too, because these are strictly nocturnal, so it is exposing itself a little bit by doing this, but obviously there is a large advantage to doing so. And this one is blue because it is teneral, or post-ecdysis. That means that it is molted recently, and it is hardening back up again. And then once this is complete, it'll have its normal colors again. And they don't start out as blue when they freshly molted. They actually start out as more of a white color, and then they transition to a light blue, a darkish blue, and then eventually become grayish again. And adults of this species are usually slightly brown, but this is due to accumulated dirt on the exoskeleton and not so much natural coloration. We've got a katydid in the genus Cophiphora here. Got it. I believe this particular katydid to be of the species Cophiphora brevirostris, but to be quite honest, I didn't even know that this genus could be found in the Sierra Nevada range in Colombia. And if this is indeed a Cophiphora brevirostris, then I have encountered this species before in Panama. Of course, this genus is quite well known for the protrusions that come out of their head. These are just colloquially referred to as horns, and on some of the species it can be quite large, but this one not so much. And I believe that's the reason why this particular species has the name brevirostris. It translates roughly to short rostrum, or nose if you'd like, and this horn can be found on both the males and the females. And it isn't entirely known why they have these horns, but one theory is that it helps counteract foliage gleaning bats, or in other words, bats that pick insects off of leaves at night. And part of the reason why this katydid has barbs on its legs is that it is predatory. This genus is known to proactively hunt insects and other arthropods, but they are omnivorous, which means that for this species, you can also observe them consuming fruits. And you can tell that this one is a female by the notably long ovipositor that katydids in this genus possess. Also, handling the species, or any Cophiphora for that matter, can be a little bit tricky, because sometimes when they bite, they latch on for a while, and if you try to remove them, their head splits from their thorax, and thus the body detaches entirely, leaving the head clamped down on your skin. Letting our katydid go back in the bush here. We've got a medium-sized land crab down here. Doesn't seem to be too happy with me. And this one is quite quick, if I do say so myself. Ooh, feisty. I bet the pinch is not very nice. Well, didn't really go for it. I'm just gonna let it go. We have another male ox beetle sitting in the leaves down here. So we've run into another quote-unquote perfect male. Often what you find with these dynastids, or more specifically Rhinostomus beetles, is when they exit the pupa or develop in the pupa, the horns become slightly misshapen, and then when they're adults, one of their horns may be pointing the wrong way. But usually it isn't by much, and I've only seen this once in an ox beetle. And speaking of variability, there is size variability where you can find small males sometimes. This one is pretty much a normal size. And small males doesn't necessarily mean minor males. For just normal small males, I suspect what's happening is when they move from the first to second to third instar, they aren't growing large enough before each transition, and it compounds over their grub life, and then when they pupate, they haven't gained enough mass to become a normal adult size. Meanwhile, those minor males, which typically are a little smaller, just have reduced horns, and sometimes they can look almost like a female. But what you want to look for is, in the male, the thorax is shiny, and for the female, there's a lot of little pits that make it appear a little more matte. Here is the larva of an ox beetle. These usually surface on rainy nights, possibly because they get flooded out of wherever they're staying in the ground, and they crawl on their back. And these are frequent victims of ants. Admittedly, I probably shouldn't be spending any time on these little beetles while I'm here in Colombia, but the males do actually have 3 little horns, or more like bumps, so they do honor the title of this video, just not quite like the ox beetles do. You can think of these little guys as dung beetles. They don't belong to the family Scarabidae. These little bulbos are from the family Geotrupidae, otherwise known as the earth-boring beetles. When the season is right, these bulbos like to fly around in the air, typically in the direction of the moon, and by the time dawn arrives, they burrow back into the ground and create these very circular-shaped holes. So you can see this small one here might belong to a bulbo, and the one next to it probably belongs to a copris beetle, such as the one we saw earlier in this video. And if anyone is curious, these beetles belong to the genus Bolbelasmus, a group which can be found both in the Old and New World. I'm just going to leave these bulbos in the forest here, and they'll probably dig down to the ground in a few minutes or so. I just found this trapdoor spider here, walking around in the leaf litter, and this one belongs to the genus Humidia. Now, I'm not entirely sure which species it is, but I think I have it narrowed down to about 3 species, and I don't want to butcher their names, so I'll just include them in the description below if you're interested. 2 of the ones I suspect were described from Colombia, and 1 of them from Venezuela. And this one right here is a wandering male. We can tell because it has relatively long legs, its abdomen is quite small, and the end of its pedipalps are emboli. Males only look like this after their final molt. And like many megalomorphs, whether this one successfully finds a mate or not, it's going to perish out here. It's not going to return to its old burrow, it's not going to create a new one. It's likely not going to eat anything, though sometimes wandering males do, and just in general, it's not going to live very long. But before these trapdoor spiders become adult males, they do possess trapdoors and burrows just like the females do, and they are largely active at night, and they feed mostly on small insects and other arthropods. The genus Humidia is a fairly widespread one. You can find them in many areas of the Old World, from Europe all the way to East Asia, and you can also find them in the New World, in the North and the South, and in many of those areas they can be quite common, especially with certain species. But in my region, these trapdoors seem to be quite tough to come by, so this is a fairly special sight. I'm going to let this one go now. I couldn't tell if this one has made it already, but I wish it luck if it hasn't. Here we have a female ox beetle, and right over here there's another one. 2 female ox beetles in basically the same location. Like I've already said a couple times before, these females are more common than the males, and I'd say it's by a factor of about 50% more. But even then, I'm a little surprised to have seen 2 of these next to each other, because I have not before with this species. And these 2 beetles are demonstrating that size difference that I was mentioning earlier, where one of these beetles, the larger one, was eating more before each molt as a larva, meanwhile the other one was not. And this is likely due to a difference in environment, where each one's access to food differed in some way. And as it goes with many Rhinostomus beetles, handling these can be a little bit of a pain because of their tarsi, or their little hooks on the feet there. And when they walk around, it's not really an issue, but when you try to pull them off, they get stuck in your skin. And very lastly for the species, they can produce a sort of clicking sound. I'm not sure what it's used for, so I'll play that clicking noise for you right now. And that's it. I think these are going to be our last ox beetles for the night. Females don't really compete with each other, so I'll put them back in the same little area here. Well, that is all the ox beetles that we are going to find for tonight. So I'm going to end this video here. Thank you for watching.